Hi there, my name is Wade, and today I'm going to be talking about dating an early Monarchs photo of Satchel Paige. This photo is here on the left. Unfortunately, it's been trimmed to only show Satchel Paige. It is a Type 1 photo, which means that PSA gave it a designation as Type 1, meaning it was printed within 2 years of the original negative being created. So a photo taken in 1940, a Type 1 photo of that would be printed sometime before 1942. So they are able to date these photos via maybe some markings on the back, including stamps from the press or the photographer's studio itself. Things like ink and paper quality also can relay some information that helps designate these photos as Type 1. But before we get into all of the dating of that photo, I wanted to touch a little bit about Satchel Paige's background before his time in the major leagues. Today is actually July 7th, which is the date that Satchel Paige signed his contract with the Cleveland Indians in 1948. It is also his birthday, so I believe it would be his 117th, and it is his 75th anniversary since his contract signing. But here in this photo, he is 45 years old. This is from 1952, and he's about 13 or 14 years older than his average teammate in this photo. So Bill Veeck thought it would be a great publicity stunt to get Satchel this recliner and put it in the bullpen. Two of the biggest characters of that era were Bill Veeck and Satchel Paige. Before he played for Bill Veeck's Indians, he played for a slew of semi-pro and barnstorming teams, including the Black Barons of Birmingham, the Pittsburgh Crawfords, Monarchs, and the Black Yankees for about one game in 1941, and a slew of other teams, which we'll touch on briefly. He had 2 stints with the Monarchs, which we'll also touch on here in a little bit. But going back to dating this photo, I wanted to go back to 1935, where Paige was playing out of Bismarck, North Dakota, on a semi-pro team. This team was actually integrated and had a lot of success. Satchel Paige is quoted as saying, "These were the best players I ever played with, but whoever heard of them? They weren't really the greatest players outside of Satchel Paige. They did have a lot of success together, but we'll touch on that. It was a little bit later in 1935 that they found some success. And then this team, the Bismarck Semi-Pros, actually played the Kansas City Monarchs in that same year, 1935. They played in Winnipeg, Canada. It was a pretty cold day, and this is all according to Sabre. This Bismarck Semi-Pro team actually tied the Monarchs 0-0, and that player there on the left is Chet Brewer. He had 13 strikeouts, and Satchel Paige had 17 strikeouts, and the game ended as a tie, as I said, because it got too dark. But again, that July 4th, 1935 date is important to dating my photo. So again, in 1935, and this is in August, a month after playing Kansas City, the Bismarck Semi-Pros actually won the National Semi-Pro Championship. There were a lot of different teams, a lot of teams divided up by race, and local teams, and Satchel Paige's team actually won the National Semi-Pro Championship of that year. It was an integrated team at the time, as I said before, and sadly in 1936, this tournament actually banned integrated teams, which is unfortunate, but it's very cool that Satchel Paige's integrated semi-pro team won the first one. And that happened again in 1935. And so in September, this is of the same year, Satchel started a game-to-game type contract with the Monarchs. It wasn't a full contract. It was a game-by-game basis. And his second was actually in 1940. He started with the Travelers the Monarchs B team. And then when he rediscovered his fastball after being hurt for so long, and that's actually how he developed his hesitation pitch. When he found his fastball again, he was promoted to the Monarchs A team, or the Monarchs. The B team is the Travelers. And so actually going through and digging through some old auctions, trying to find a similar photo, I was able to find this on RMY auctions. This photo actually does have a back stamp on it, dated 1941, or September of 1941, which would have been right around when Satchel Paige started playing with the Monarchs full time. This photo was sold in 2018, I believe, and at that time it did not have a letter of authenticity stating it was a Type 1 photo. I myself, after doing some more research and just looking at this photo, I don't believe it was, I believe that image of Satchel Paige is from 1935, and we'll get into that more, but I believe this photo is from 1941. I don't think this is a Type 1 photo myself, even with the back stamping, and we'll get into why I believe that. So why I believe that is because in 1941, this picture is actually from 1941, and it shows the Kansas City Monarchs' famous red sleeve and white uniforms with those white hats with the red piping. Satchel Paige is on this 1941 team. They won the Negro American League pennant that year, and this is a photo of that team. And then I can differentiate that with their 1942 team because Rainy Bibbs is on this 1941 team. He's on the roster. He's in this photo. And then in 1942, he was not on that roster. And going back, that's just important to clarify that this photo is probably not from 1941. That image is not from 1941 of Satchel because it's just the wrong uniform. So going back to my photo there in the center, we can see that the Bismarck hat is in both photos. We can see that the Monarchs jersey is pretty much spot on with that piping along the sleeves. The Monarch font is the same, and the borders on the belt loops, being black, is very similar, if not exactly the same. So that is why I believe this photo is probably around taken from 1935. Again, it'd be a little strange. We can see that the hat in the Monarchs photo on the right there is different than the Bismarck hat he's wearing. If he just came from Bismarck to Kansas City, it makes sense that he would still have his Bismarck hat as the one he's wearing. So we'll get into some more uniforms from around that era. In 1934, they had this uniform. It's a little bit different, same type of font. They have different hats in this uniform with some white lettering. But there is a black piping on the front of those uniforms. It's a little hard to see, but if you zoom in, you can see that difference. And then again in 1934, we have that same uniform with the black piping on the front. I'm just calling it black because it's a black and white photo. It could very well be a red or orange or something along those lines, but we can see those uniforms with the black piping, and then we can see the uniform there that kind of more along the lines matches Satchel Paige's uniform in that photo. It's same font, black piping along the sleeves, no piping along the buttons, and I think those hats are a bit different than those other 1934 hats. And then in 1936, we have this photo showing an away team uniform that says Kansas City Monarchs on it. But there is one player there you see that may have forgotten his uniform on this road trip. Maybe he was wearing their home uniform. We can see that it is pretty much a spot-on match for the 1934 uniform with no piping and Satchel Paige's uniform with no piping. And then just going back to 1941 again, this photo is dated 1941, and it is, again, that red sleeve, white uniform with that red or black piping on the front of it, with the famous white hat with the red piping. So, just to recap, I have my photo there in the center. I am fairly certain it is dated 1935. It is a Type 1 designation, so maybe it was printed 1935 or between 1935 and 1937. So we can see that the hat is very similar. The uniform is very similar from those 1935 photos there on the left. And it doesn't really match that 1941 uniform, which is from, again, that standalone Satchel Paige. Is the only other image I found where he's wearing a Bismarck hat and the Monarchs uniform. I'm fairly confident in saying this is a 1935 to 1937 Satchel Paige image, which is significant just because it would make it one of the earliest ones that I've been able to find. There's not really many more images from this era of Satchel Paige's stint with the Monarchs. Again, he played in 1935 with them on a game-by-game basis, so getting this photo of him would be, a very unique situation. Before his stint with them, 1940 to 1941 through 1947 or 48. That was where the majority of his photos with the Monarchs come from, So let me know what you guys think. I believe this is a very unique, very rare image. It is unfortunate that it is trimmed down, but I'm more than happy that I added it to my collection. And happy birthday to Satchel Paige, and happy Satchel Paige Day to all you guys. I hope you have some type of Satchel Paige in your collection, whether that be a bobblehead, a ticket. He's such a unique player, a unique story, and probably one of the greatest pitchers of all time. So I think everyone really should add some type of Satchel Paige to their collection.